Entrepreneurship is a craft. I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs. All entrepreneurs, true entrepreneurs, are doers. They're willing to get their hands dirty. They're willing to get calluses and roll up their sleeves and do the things in order to build. And so an entrepreneur is a builder. There's entrepreneurs that see that they can solve a problem in a unique way or tackle an industry in a way that hasn't been tackled before.
Here's the truth. Like, you had to get yourself to a place of confidence and conviction that you could lower that armor and just show up. Unbridled, no issues, nothing to justify, protect, or defend, but being you authentically.
The experience on going on Shark Tank was incredible. It was 1 in a million. It was a blast.
Welcome back to Flipping the Lid, everybody. You know what we do here by now, and I love to be able to bring in real, raw people to have impact in your world. Ones that are actually willing to have the dialogue that exposes all of the brilliance in our lives, the successes, the wins, the way that we're helping others, but also the journey to get there. And today we have somebody that's no different. He's a husband, he's a father, he's an entrepreneur, but he's also somebody that has built and scaled and sold multiple of his own businesses and now helps other founders do the same. He's got his own podcast. He's got his hands in a whole variety of things, whether it be AI or consumer goods. But at the end of the day, in the little bit of time that I've spent with him, he's a real human being who's ready to have real impact and real conversations. And so, Anthony Franco, man, so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Well, the only question that I ask every guest, and you already got a little bit of a preview on this because you were on my other show as well, is after I introduce you, right, regardless of whatever it is that I say about you or whoever you are, in my words, who are you in your words, brother?
I think you kind of mentioned it. Like in my opening, I don't know if I have anything else to add. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm an entrepreneur. Essentially, I just say I'm an entrepreneur, which usually people look at me like, okay, so you're unemployed. And sometimes that's true. But that's how I identify myself.
So I want you to further define that. What does being an entrepreneur mean to you?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. Entrepreneurship is a craft. I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and I would say that it's really hard to define the characteristics of an entrepreneur, but there are certain traits that a lot of them have. All entrepreneurs, true entrepreneurs, are doers. They're willing to get their hands dirty. They're willing to get calluses and roll up their sleeves and do the things in order to build. And so an entrepreneur is a builder that's also a capitalist. I guess those are the two things. Those are the two traits, and everything else is optional, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate even just your real approach and saying, man, I don't quite know. I haven't thought about how to define that before.
No.
But yet at the same time, I do appreciate even where you took it. I do believe that it's a builder. I believe it's somebody that typically sees areas of either opportunity or problems and they create solutions, right? And oftentimes, at least what I find is there's many entrepreneurs who created solutions for themselves that they learned how to scale and sell to other people, right? And so it's also very interesting because this builder in this craft, it implies the same thing as it does in the personal development side of the world. There is no final destination. It's just constant evolution and attempts, right? It's this refining process. And so if you look at it as a craft and this building element, what have you learned in your years as an entrepreneur that have allowed you to refine your craft? And what were the areas early on that maybe entrepreneurship carried a different definition for you than it did today?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
You told me you wanted good questions, bro. You said you were waiting. You said you were waiting for a podcast to stump you on questions.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to unpack that. So I never, I'm going to kind of go at a different angle. I never set out to be an entrepreneur. Like, I don't think kids grow up. Well, maybe today some of them do. They're like, I want to be an entrepreneur, but what does that mean? Right.
Exactly.
It's so different than having a job. And most people that have, look, I will say this. You could almost say I'm jealous of people that can hold a regular 9-to-5. That seems like a normal life. I'm a terrible employee. I'm really bad at taking direction especially from leadership I don't respect or I'm not aligned with. That gets into, so I didn't know what an entrepreneur was when I was a kid and started out doing side hustles to earn arcade money when I was a kid. And that was actually entrepreneurial, but I didn't have a word for it. Then did the regular job thing, hated the regular job, always had a side hustle. And those side hustles turned out to be more compelling and more economically satisfying than the job that I had. So yeah, I think, and then you asked me, how do you treat it like a craft? First of all, you have to call it a craft. You have to call it what it is, and that's a craft. Like you have to take entrepreneurship as a journey, as you're constantly learning. So you have to constantly be looking for things that are broken. I guess the way to treat it like a craft is you're never finished. You're never finished at being an entrepreneur. You're never finished learning. That curiosity never goes away. And that's either curiosity in the product that you're making or customers you're talking to, or how to read a P&L sheet or P&L or balance sheet. So it's just constant curiosity about learning all the things it takes to run a business.
Yeah, I think curiosity is a key factor, and it's one that I think is not often highlighted enough in the process. And you know, it in many ways it can be used as a negative because there are certain people who say there's one right way to do everything, right? Or they teach a certain belief that it's this way or not, and yet there's a variety that exists. What I appreciate is that you also had an early entry into entrepreneurship, right? You found a way to monetize and make some money in the arcade game. My first one was picking up dog poop when I was 10, right? And
Nice.
It was motivated because my parents didn't want to buy me the stereo that I wanted. And so they said, we'll figure out a way to do it. And I knew I had neighbors that had dogs and I knew nobody wanted to pick up dog shit. So I went and I bought I literally bought a bucket and a scoop. And that was early phase entrepreneurship for me, right? But it helped solve the problem. Now, back then, what motivated you to do what you were doing with arcades? What caused you to actually see the opportunity there? And what were you going after at the time?
Well, so the job that I took was I took spray cans and stencils door to door and asked them if I could paint their street number on the curb. And I charged $5 for it. It was just, I loved the arcade. So I was just looking to float my Pac-Man addiction.
I misinterpreted what you said. So you worked so that you could go to the arcade.
I worked so that I could go to the arcade at the bowling alley down the road. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So again, you saw a need, you found a way to get it, and you hustled your way there. Right?
Yeah.
It's something that I just appreciate.
Yeah.
How long did that last?
So I did that for 2 summers, and it was good enough. And then I started getting interested in girls, and the arcade didn't become as attractive to me anymore.
I totally understand that. I completely understand that. Now, what was the curiosity that you were operating under, you know, during that time and moving into this next phase of realizing that you're not a good employee, right? How did you unpack that? When did you discover you aren't good at working for someone else? And how did you make those next steps into taking a risk on yourself?
Well, some of it was my choice. Some of it was getting fired and them telling me I was a terrible employee. So like, I don't know if it was like a realization other than, I can't earn a job. I can't earn a living working for people. They don't like me working for them. So I got to figure it out. Now, actually, ironically, the more I became an entrepreneur and the more I became a leader, the better follower I became. So I do respect how hard leadership is now and can follow instructions a lot better than I used to. But again, it was just a side hustle. So my first real company was born out of a side hustle that I was doing, working in early internet technologies, building a website for somebody. And then me and a couple friends decided to create a consulting practice to do technology for .coms, and we got acquired, and that's really kind of how the journey came out.
When you got into that business and it was a side hustle, did you see a path that it was going to have an exit for you?
No.
So give us a little bit of insight into that, because I think that's also a lot of founders don't necessarily have the desire to sell at some point. Some do. Some have a business that ends up becoming a lifestyle business, right? This was a side hustle that turned into something much bigger.
Yes.
What did you learn in that first side hustle that became your first exit? And how did you translate that into your future opportunities?
I cover entrepreneurship. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. I would say a vast majority of entrepreneurs, high 99 percentile, don't enter their business to exit it. They don't have an exit strategy. Exit strategies are typically for people looking for venture capital. And when venture capital asks you what's your exit strategy, they're not really asking what your exit strategy is. They're asking, how am I going to get my money out? So having an exit strategy is, I don't ding anybody for having that, but it's not how most businesses start. Most businesses start, I need to earn a living and I can't get a job. A lot of businesses start there. A lot of businesses start, I am in a trade and I think I can go build my own practice. Like if you're an HVAC technician, HVAC technicians usually start HVAC companies. If you're a plumber, you become a plumber. And there's a lot of great lifestyle, legacy, family businesses that start just that way. And then there's other businesses that see that they can, there's entrepreneurs that see that they can solve a problem in a unique way or tackle an industry in a way that hasn't been tackled before. And that's more like me. Like I tend to swing a little bit bigger and try to solve bigger problems rather than just taking a trade and applying it.
Mm-hmm. Give some examples. What are some of the bigger problems you've solved? You've obviously launched 7 companies. You've successfully exited 6, right? What were the big problems you swung at?
So I'll give you 2 examples. One was this was early on. One of my early product companies was a SaaS company, and we made it. So the problem that we found is I was working. My company was acquired. I was working for the company that acquired us, and they were in email marketing. They were in marketing, and part of what they did was email. And what we noticed at that time was me and a couple folks just noticed that you could design an email and then send it, and you had no idea what that email looked like in the email client. So we decided to build a tool that rendered that email in all the email clients and gave you a report on how well it rendered it within all those. So it was a marketer problem that we solved in email marketing. Don't blame me for spam. We didn't do any spam, but we did help spammers. I guess you could say, by making sure that the email properly appeared in email clients. And that was that's something that had never been done before. You know, there was the whole technology about rendering it. There was all the reporting infrastructure and all of that stuff that me and a couple other founders solved. And then we sold that company. You know, we only had, it wasn't pre-revenue, but it was just as we starting to earn revenue. And the other, another example was, I started a consulting firm. We wanted to build a product firm out of it, but we started as a consulting firm and wound up building software for Fortune 100s that didn't suck. So, you know, Apple is known for its really easy to use technology. And most other companies didn't care about that. Well, they were starting to, but didn't have any expertise to go to build that technology for them. So started a practice, an agency, and it wound up being a fairly large organization that we just, our mission in life was building software that was easy to use.
Yeah. Which again, I would suggest is a very big problem because many people don't know how to utilize this stuff.
It's simple to say, it was really hard to do. Yes.
Yeah, of course it is. I got to tell you, I've gotten very deep into the AI world, and it's no different, right? Like, when I sit here and say I've gotten very deep, I am as much of an expert as I'm capable of being at this point, given the trajectory of AI, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I don't claim to have any of it mastered. I feel like we're all still just scratching the surface. But part of it is it's supposed to have this concept of consumer ease. But what it also really is doing is it's scratching the surface, and most people don't know how to fully utilize any of the tools. And so that's where Apple got a lot of their credentials, if you will, was to make things easy in the entryway. Now, your whole history and background seems to be on the tech side. It started motivated to play video games, right? Which has coding and all these other components that are behind it. And clearly you've had this desire to kind of be involved in tech and emerging tech since you've been around. It's something that's always driven you.
I barely graduated high school because I almost failed a class because I spent all of my time in the computer lab, like coding on a little old Apple IIe computer. Like, yes, I've been obsessed. You could say I've been obsessed my entire life with tech.
So that's where I wanted to just focus for a minute. When did you realize that you had an interest, but also a kind of an intuition and a gift to utilize tech?
Senior year in high school. I took a computer programming class Dr. Jack Pribnow. I don't think he's still, like, he was the teacher. I don't remember any of my teachers' names, but I remember his. And he showed us, he did this really interesting exercise where he lined everybody up in a line and gave everybody a set of instructions on a piece of paper. And it was basically programmatic instructions on how to do division. What person by person. It said, do this and then do this and do this. And you came out at the last person had the answer. And something clicked for me. And he did a great job at getting me interested in the class. And then there was this connection between I could manifest an idea on a computer that just, I don't know how to describe it other than I loved computer games. And I'm like, oh, I can now do this myself. I can manifest an idea into reality. And there was just something that just I was born in the right century or whatever. It just clicked for me really, really, really strongly.
Well, I even appreciate the way that you just said that. I referenced AI a minute ago, and this is one of the things that is interesting. I've been a techie most of my life, for lack of a better term, but I don't consider myself as deep as most. But I do have an interest in technology, emerging technology. I like to be able to play with things, iterate with stuff. I've got a mechanic and engineer type mind, right? In the way that I deconstruct and can rebuild certain things. And so I say this because one of the things I've said recently about how I've been utilizing AI is that it allows me to make something tangible in a way that would otherwise only be verbally described, right? It's a way that I've been able to literally manifest what's in my head or what I'm reflecting back into a way that someone can consume it, put their hands on it, touch it, feel it, experience it. And technology, in a lot of ways, is how you just described that it's like I could actually have and create my own world with these tools that otherwise the archaic element of how we operated wouldn't allow that. And in some ways, what I hear is that you found a certain sense of freedom in your ability to utilize technology.
It's creative. It's creative freedom. It's exactly what it is. Yep.
Yeah. And this comes full circle, right? Back to the curiosity and ultimately having a craft. Like, creativity is not just a gift. It's something that's continually iterated on. It's the ability to ask different questions, look at things through a different perspective. And you learned this early on in some of these tech phases. What I love, and I can just feel this in your presence. I mean, shit, looking behind you, right? Like the old school graphic comic that's back there with the rocket ships and like how that is. Like, I feel like you just have been like ingrained almost as like someone that's just been able to see the evolution of comics and technology and how it's been impacting in the world. When did you realize that technology was going to be your future?
I don't think technology is my future. I think building things is, and technology is an enabler.
Is the vehicle. Beautiful pivot.
Yep. Yeah. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to be in technology, right? I can code, but I'm not a developer.
Right. Yeah. I understand
It's just a thing that I can use in order to build cool stuff.
Beautiful. Talk to me a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur while also simultaneously being a husband and father. And what are the elements that created restriction or conflict in that? And where were the freedoms and the joys allowed in the way that you built your businesses? So
I did experience some hard times through entrepreneurship as I have a divorce and I've remarried, and my story is not unusual for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs suffer from higher rates of divorce, higher rates of depression, higher rates of suicide, way higher rates of financial issues and struggles and failures. And so it's not something that you can jump into. It's overly romanticized. It's not something you can jump into and be successful most of the time. Most of the time you're going to fail. And if you're doing it right, you're ignoring something else that matters, that should matter to you deeply as well. And there's two sides to the divorce, but for my part, I wasn't as present as I could have been. And wasn't engaged in my family as much as I should have been, and still suffer from that even on my second marriage. And I have two young kids in the house. And sometimes I'll be so mentally consumed with the problem that I forget my responsibilities as dad, and I have to snap out of it and tune back into family. And my wife is, for the most part, is very gracious in reminding me without anger that I need to snap back in. Having the right partner really matters. But yeah, to bring that all around, I don't think, Brian, that I have been perfect in that. I don't know how to offer advice because I'm a broken individual when it comes to that respect of my life.
And I have a lot of respect for how you even just responded to that, right? I mean, what's cool is I wasn't even looking for perfection or necessarily your direct advice, but just your lived experience, which is so well articulated, right? Do I have permission to reflect something back to you just for a second?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay. You, in that response, utilized the word should multiple times. And I highlight it because it's a very tangible piece I can reflect back to you, but your whole energy even shifted in the beginning of it. And the reason I highlight it is because should is a shame-based word. It implies that whoever you are, whatever you're doing, it's not good enough. Right. And so I say that because as you communicate the word should, there's clearly some internal elements of shame and blame that still take place based on what you didn't know in your first marriage and iteration, but also the real-time reflection to even what you're saying is happening currently, which is you're still working on this. And so I highlight this because what I do believe about you and the little bit that we've interacted with is that when you see something and you see opportunity, you take it seriously and you take action. You even described yourself as an entrepreneur as being a doer. Right. And so the reason I highlight this is because shame and blame serves no purpose. Should serves no purpose. Now, instead, you could replace it with the word could or would. What could you have done differently? Or what would you do differently now that you know what you know? Right. And that it just changes the whole dynamic.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. So I appreciate you saying that. Shame is an interesting motivator. And I don't know, for me in my life, I don't know where I'd be without that level of shame. Like shame can be overstated, but like that level of embarrassment that I could have done something better, and that I knew I could do better and I didn't. That's really what shame is for me. So avoiding shame is a great motivator. That feeling of not wanting to feel that again or not wanting to be there again has changed my life in positive ways as well.
What I want to be clear on is when I say the removal of shame and blame, it's not that you don't recognize and take ownership and apply lessons and learnings from the things that have passed. It's that there's a level of forgiveness, recognizing that you cannot alter it, but you can change what's happening in the future. Right. It's even the same concept of if you wake up in the morning and say, I should have gotten up earlier today, or I should have eaten better last night, or I shouldn't have had that last drink, or I should have worked out more yesterday. Right. Should is a shame-based word. And all I'm implying is that it embeds shame actively in the energy real time versus being objective and future focused, which is what I'm hearing you say. Right. I don't disagree with you, by the way. Avoidance of shame is a huge motivator because the experience and feeling of shame is pure suffering. Right. But what I'm trying to suggest is that healing through the pieces that still help you identify with the shame isn't saying that you didn't take actions or that you're not taking ownership for what you could have done better or would do better moving forward. Does that make sense?
It totally does. I'm going to tug on something you said also because there's an interesting yin and yang to this shame.
I agree.
This shame thing. And that is what I find really interesting. And maybe something that I could maybe not feel shame about is that shame doesn't, the fear of shame doesn't prevent me from. And I notice that with a lot of entrepreneurs that say, there are people that say they want to be entrepreneurs, but they're worried about looking like a fool.
Yeah.
Right. And so it prevents you from, it prevents you from leaning in. And so I just want to acknowledge that is something that I see quite a lot in entrepreneurship.
You're
is
exactly
people not moving forward. Right.
You're exactly right because of the fear of judgment, criticism, or shame on the other side of it, right? What is it going to say about it?
Right, exactly right.
And here's what I'm trying to highlight to you. That's shame to the external side. I'm highlighting shame on the internal side. And where I also see a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck is there's a lot of doers that don't give two fucks what the external world says, which is why they've become so financially successful, but yet they carry a deep level of disconnection internally, which still prevents them, regardless of a full bank account, from feeling full inside and actually experiencing the joy, freedom, and fulfillment that their work has produced or given them the opportunity to do so, right? And so it's both sides. It keeps people contained. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
with love. That's what I was trying to highlight is brother man, like success doesn't mean the eradication of shame, right? Financial success in business doesn't mean the removal of shame, right? Shame can keep people trapped to never accomplish the financial success that they want. But there are many who by the way, me, who learned to receive love, validation, and connection through performance. It meant that everything was contingent upon what I did, which is what has made me so successful in building and exiting businesses, right? Because it was about the external, that was a motivator, and I didn't give two shits what anybody else thought, right? At least that I showed them.
That's exactly right. There's also, again, looking at the flip side to that, I have experienced the opposite of that, where you all of a sudden start to have pride in yourself.
Yeah.
And that pride can be a disabler as well.
It's ego. It's ego that's also a shame-based energy, and it shows up in a similar way that disconnects you, right? 100%. Yeah. And by the way, I've been there too. I don't sit here projecting any of this without having an understanding of it. But like I've been there and I get it, right? And so that's all I was trying to reflect back to you is what it sounds like to me is that you learned a lot from your first experience and you're still learning in the current experience. Yes. And all I'm trying to suggest all I'm trying to suggest is in the same way that you operate in business, remove that shame and blame and forgive yourself and pay attention to what can you refine, iterate, right, in your own craft as a husband and a father, because it's clearly something that's important to you. I also want to explore with you for just 1 second, just because I know this to be true about myself as well, but many, many entrepreneurs. One of the things that makes so many entrepreneurs very, very gifted in the ways that they can create problems and solutions is many are highly neurodivergent, have ADHD, have different elements of their brains functioning differently that might apply towards a tech path or otherwise, right? Where have you ever taken attempts to raise awareness to your own internal wiring in ways to understand and master it as it shows up in the external world?
So I've never gone to a doctor and said, am I ADHD or on the spectrum in any way? I probably am.
Me too, by the way. just to be clear.
I'm very likely and I don't think ADHD, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert in it, but my understanding of ADHD and how it would apply to me is it's not an inability to focus. It's the inability to unfocus from something else. Like it's focused.
Both, but yes, there's the hyper focus that's attached to it. Yes.
Yeah. So I hyper focus, which results in the impact of me not focusing on things that probably should, right? So
you should again, bro. See, there you go.
It's a word I'm not going to get rid of. I'm sorry. Like, Brian, you're just going to have to forgive me for
I forgive you. I just don't want you to shame yourself all the time.
I'm not. It's just probably the wrong word, but in ways that I want to. How's about that?
Correct.
So
there you go.
So better way to say it. So anyway, and then you talk about neurodiversity. I want to be really careful about how I word this because I don't want to come across condescending, but weaknesses are strengths in my opinion.
I agree completely.
Constraints are opportunities. So it's all about how you apply it and how you approach life with gratitude rather than victimhood.
I completely agree with you.
And so I don't dwell on what my quote weaknesses are or would be. I just like, all right, what given what I've been given, what can I accomplish, and just focus on what can be done versus what my limiting factors are.
So to be clear, you and I are very aligned. I don't see these things as weaknesses. By the way, I have 2 neurodiverse kids. My son's on the spectrum, has ADHD. I've learned that I'm likely on all of those things because of what I've had to learn through my son and my daughter. But I'm also, because of who I am, and you might not know my story, but when I was 7, I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn from my body, reattached, 24 surgeries.
Oh my gosh.
Years, right? But point is, I grew up with a lot of labels that people told me what I could and couldn't do. And I wire it exactly the same way as you. Here's where I come from with it. Understanding your neurological conditioning and wiring allows you to better set up ways to be successful, not that you have to accommodate for weakness. Right? It's about understanding how to advocate for what is your superpower, which is the ability to hyperfocus. And where I was going with that, my friend, is that my wife literally knows because of how I am, and I will hyperfocus. I can lose myself in my work. I can lose I can lose time perception. I can lose perception of reality. I'm not even allowed to touch my own calendar because my perception of time, even though I can operate on a calendar, is not effective. Why I say this to you is it took years for me to say that and own that, but the same thing can be true. She can come up to me and say, when I'm hyper focused, not being present with my family, hey, you neurodiverse fuck. Can you like refocus your present, like your focus here right now? Right. And the biggest thing in saying that, right, is like, I had to learn to laugh at myself. Cause again, it's not a negative thing, but do I have that tendency? Yes. Does it sometimes take me out of the present moment in ways that I don't desire? Yes. Am I very hyper aware? And have I set up crazy systems to ensure that I do it as successfully as possible more often than not? Yes. However, are there still moments that I fall into my own wiring and it's not bad or good? It's just, I may lose perception of time. And all I'm trying to highlight in this is it's like, dude, this is your superpower. And because of what I sensed on that whole family dynamic, all I'm trying to say is, bro, what are the ways that you better understand yourself to communicate with your current partner and set up those systems and tools to remove the anger and set up success for what you ultimately want to accomplish, which is no different than what you do with everything in your businesses.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Plumber's sink or cobbler's shoe syndrome for my own self-awareness. Yeah, you're right.
It's it. That's all I'm reflecting back is like, dude, you've got this hyper focus ability to ask questions, iterate and understand, test new things, communicate it. Because largely what's interesting is what I would almost say your superpower is, if I had to guess, and I could be off on this because I think it's probably evolved, it's your ability to make technology accessible and usable by humans. Meaning you are the intersection between technology and the human experience of that technology and the solutions that you've created, as well as how you operate in business as an entrepreneur to coach yourself and others to not get stuck, to have the practical actionable advice and what you ultimately operate with.
Yeah. So I always put it as simplifying complexity. I'm able to take something that's really complex and translate it in a way that people that don't like complexity can approach it in an easy way.
Where did you learn that ability and how have you refined that part of your craft?
Where did I learn that ability? Coding forces you to think in first principles. And I think first principle thinking is the way to do that. It's like, all right, fundamentally, and it's also empathy. So I think it's first principle thinking and empathy. Where is this person coming from? What's their mental model? And how do I parable the complexity to a place where this person can wrap it in their brain? And it's really hard to do. And then what makes that really even more difficult is when you're built, so that's easier to do one-on-one. It's really hard to do one-on-many.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to take the lowest common denominator of the simplicity, because otherwise you're going to miss some people. So I think it's really just experience. I think it's just doing it for years and years and years and years. And it's funny, like I used to hate English in school, but I'm now a word snob because words is the way you do it. And,
yes.
and I think about words all the time and how I communicate, both one-on-one and also in written form. I guess I just become more fascinated with the English language. That's how I did it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, communication is everything, right?
Yes.
And what's interesting is I would have always told you that I had a very strong ability to communicate, but I had a lot of blind spots that were around it that, even to your whole point, taking that first principle component and understanding one-on-one versus one-on-many, and then the iterative process is truly a way that we get better access to our communication and also make it accessible to others. Communication is something that impacts everything. And I would be fascinated to understand that, as you say, you've almost become obsessed with words. What has like this intentional process of more clearly understanding the English language looked like for you in practicality? Like, how have you gone about it with intention? And what have been the impacts of this improved communication in your life or businesses?
So the intentionality, it comes from marketing, actually being responsible for marketing and sales. So crafting the language to convince has made me really respect people that do it naturally. And I don't think anybody does it naturally, but there's people way more gifted at it than I am. And I just like, wow, that person does a really good job. It must have taken them a long time to get there, because it's still a craft, right? Mm-hmm. But that creating the language and reading David Ogilvy, like David Ogilvy's excellent at this, yes. About refining how words and ideas can change nations. And it manifests just by better copy. And it's really kind of funny, because I went from this very logical, truly linear thought process when you're developing and writing code. It's very logical. And what's wonderful about code is it either works or it doesn't. Yeah. It's very binary, right? You code it and you hit, and did it bug out, or did it do what you expected? With communication, verbal communication and written communication, it's not that way. It's like it works or it doesn't, but it also can land in different ways. There's gray areas, there's interpretations, there's places where people are coming from as they're reading it. And being good at that makes me better with AI.
Of course it does.
Because prompt writing a prompt, it's entirely good communication skills, thorough, step-by-step, logical thinking like program, but also caring about the language that is used to produce the results that you want out of AI. It's really come full circle.
You're spot on, though. And I think that goes even to what I was suggesting with AI in general, is I feel like most people are scratching the surface because they don't know how to articulate a vision. They don't know how to ask and further iterate. They don't know how to communicate clearly what they're attempting to get, nor do they know how to refine based on whatever they've been given, how to take it further. Right. Which is this like deeper piece. I just taught a lesson not long ago in my mastermind, and you just gave like a little master class in even what I was communicating, right? The importance of understanding our language is everything, because for every single word, there is the definition, which is the literal meaning of it, right? There's the context, which is how it's being used in the situation. There's the intent, which is the motivation that's behind it. There's the emotion, which is our personal history in response to it, right? So we could hear a word and it puts us into a state that we don't hear anything else because of our association with it. And then that nuance, right? And so to your point exactly, with code, it is binary, but it's not with people. It's a very highly complex web, really, of understanding language and both the verbals and nonverbals of those word uses.
Yes. And it's becoming a much more needed skill as the age of AI is coming. Being able to communicate what you want and how you want it is way, I know this doesn't sound intuitive, but that is way harder than programming. Programming, you don't have to articulate what's in your head. You just manifest it. And with AI and with people, you have to articulate what's in your head, which is way harder to do. It's way harder to do.
Well, it is. And I mean, it's two totally different sets of skills as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even in one of the custom AI solutions that we're building right now, where my brilliance is in getting the outputs that we want, right? And though I can learn and connect pieces through the technology components, that's not where I want to shine, because to your point, I need somebody who knows how to do that as a partner who understands all of the logistics of it. But the magic for me is in how am I guiding these prompts and custom prompts within these agents to have very defined and custom tasks that there's very little room for error and a high level of predictability and consistency. And it all comes down into the nuance of those communications and then how they communicate with each other. We're testing some stuff right now, which is really fascinating, which is bringing to surface real time exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a whole practice. I'm actually one of my clients is an AI company, and we're working together on something to properly articulate the practice of building AI agents into an organization. Mm-hmm. There's no practice around that right now. There's no skill. Like There's no like I'm when you say you're in AI, it means nothing. It's like, do you use ChatGPT or are you writing LLMs, which has neither one of them has anything to do with actually incorporating it into an organization.
Correct.
So there's a lot of maturity that has to happen, and it's going to happen quickly. But there's a lot of maturity that has to happen in this whole AI landscape.
Well, I mean, you're spot on. And to your point, and I'm even happy you said it, AI means 5,000 different things, if not more, right? And to your point, the complexity of it, whether it's just using ChatGPT or Claude or going into N8N and doing full-blown integrations and communications of systems, there's all varying degrees. You know, it sounds like you've touched a whole variety of what these concepts are, but I'm curious, what was the business or the product or the solution that took you on Shark Tank 5 years ago that allowed you to land this deal with Mr. Wonderful?
Yeah, so that was my foray into manufacturing. So I have 7 starts, 6 successful exits. The one that was not successful was that company.
Oh, really?
It was. So went on Shark Tank. The company was doing really well. Kevin invested in us. We were doing really well, and ultimately, what happened with that business is it was a consumer product. It was called MC Squares, and we made reusable sticky notes. That was our claim to fame. But we made sticky notes and calendars and all kinds of little fun dry erase products. And I built a whole manufacturing facility around it. Really great organization, except 95% of my business came from Amazon. And a glitch in the Amazon backend that corrupted our listings caused sales to tank immediately 50% for 9 months. And we had a manufacturing facility that I could not keep the manufacturing facility running while I was trying to figure out how to rebuild sales on Amazon. Amazon ultimately admitted it was their problem, but there's nothing you can do about it. And the company just wasn't able to survive beyond it. Anyway, I didn't mean to bring you down on that, but the experience on going on Shark Tank was incredible. It was 1 in a million. It was a blast. Kevin was terrific. He was a great partner for us. Gosh, what can I say about being on Shark Tank? Most entrepreneurs won't admit it, but most entrepreneurs want to be on that show. Just have the chance of pitching in front of the sharks and millions of people.
Yeah. It's I have gotten to know some of the folks from that world in some different experiences, and it's unreal. And it's amazing that it has been such a long-standing franchise that has truly helped launch a lot of businesses into the next stratosphere. What did you learn in that process, whether it was through the Shark Tank experience and how to pitch and position yourself, or whether it was the diversification of revenue, right? That ultimately, or the lack of diversification of revenue and the source that ultimately kind of bit you. What was your biggest takeaway from that experience?
So there's a lot of there's a lot of takeaways, but the thing that the story I'll share with you is this: 2 days before going on Shark Tank, I'm on the Sony lot. I've gone through the process of getting everything set up, getting on the lot. Now I'm just waiting for my time to go film. And what's going through my head is essentially this: Shark Tank. If you watch all the, and I consumed every episode every pitch, up until the time I was on air. And essentially entrepreneurs fall into 3 buckets. And I say cast, but in reality, they just kind of land here. You're either the villain, right? The jerk entrepreneur that's full of themselves. You're the fool that doesn't know anything about their business, or you're the hero. You fall into one of those 3 buckets. This is my positioning. And I couldn't get past the fool part. Like, what if I play the fool? What if that's what that happens to me? That shame, right? Could I live through the shame of being played a fool on TV? So I called a friend who was under NDA. He happened to be under NDA as an advisor for my business, so I could talk to him about me being on Shark Tank, which you're not supposed to do, but he was under NDA. And I'm like, dude, I can't get past this. I can't get through this. And this is like one of those friends that tell you how it is, right? He's true 20-year long friend. And he said, Anthony, dude, you're kind of a goofball. Like, we know you, you kind of do say silly things, but for some reason, we all still like really like you. Like, you don't need to shy away from the fact that you say stupid things sometimes. Everybody does. For some reason, when you say something stupid, everybody just kind of laughs with you and just like rolls with it. Like, so just go with it. And what that statement did for me is literally, I'm pitching. Barbara asks me a question during my pitch that if I hadn't heard that advice, I would have challenged her. I would have argued with her on it. And instead, I'm like, just play into it. Just go, yeah, you got me, Barbara. And it switched from me being the fool to me being the hero, right? It's like fools are the ones that reject who they are and try to pretend they're somebody they're not. And instead, I just kind of owned it.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I learned is be okay with yourself, warts and all.
Yeah.
And life's going to work out okay if you do that.
You just supported one of the core concepts that we teach, though. I mean, I think we all seek and desire four things. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected, right? But the second we don't feel seen and understood and connected or protected and safe, what do? We protect ourselves, right?
Yep.
It's like if you imagine that 35-gallon black trash bag and you lift up that bag in front of you, it's like your flat, opaque piece of armor, right? It's like you could be going into a networking event where everybody's handing out business cards and wants something from you instead of for you. It could be going back to your family's house, right? For the holidays, and your aunt, your dad, and your grandma are going to look at you and say certain things that are going to cause you to feel a certain way, and you start feeling it weeks out. Or it could literally be, oh my gosh, like I don't want to come across as dumb or the fool on this show, right?
Yes.
But here's what also happens. The second you put up that force field, the question becomes, how could you ever expect anyone to see who you are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, your heart, your intent, your soul, your desires, your boundaries, your value, your worth, delivered through this opaque force field? And that's assuming that they're not carrying their own, that's going to further dilute the message, which comes full circle to our communication conversation a second ago, right? But here's the truth. Like, you had to get yourself to a place of confidence, conviction that you could lower that armor and just show up unbridled, no issues, nothing to justify, protect, or defend, but being you authentically. And it led to a deal. Regardless of the outcome of the company, I would consider anybody who lands a deal on that show to have successfully won the attempt on the show.
Yeah, I do not look back. So there's some regret for sure about what happened with MC Squares, but I don't look back at it with shame. I learned a lot and certainly had a lot of really great experiences. Gave people some really great jobs and had a lot of fun with it and improved some folks' lives. So I don't look back at the entire experience. I didn't
hear that from you at all. I think what I was trying to just say was double down on the point that you made. Had you walked in there protected and guarded, you might not have gotten that deal.
No, I wouldn't have. I totally wouldn't. I would have argued with Barbara and wound up looking like a jackass.
And you would have become the fool that you didn't want to become anyway, right?
Exactly,
or the ego. And that's the really funny thing, right? That was the whole point I was making. The second we protect ourselves, we guarantee we're going to disconnect ourselves from who we are and what we want, right? And that was the lesson you learned in there that's allowed you to kind of move forward.
That's exactly right.
If you had to look at your current life or business, what would you say is your biggest problem currently? Or opportunity, however you choose to frame it in your own mind and language.
I'm at a weird junction in my life where I'm used to starting and building a business. And I'm used to working as an operator and being the chief doer in charge. And now I'm in a phase where I don't have one thing that I'm like all in on, a company that I want to chase or a problem I want to solve. And that's not to say that it won't ever appear for me again. But right now I'm doing a lot of, I call it revenue diversification, but in reality is I'm not picking what I want to be next. And it gives me this really, and I'm recognizing it gives me this really unique opportunity to be more present at home. I get to work on a lot more diverse things as a coach, or I'm not a coach, but as a consultant, or I'm also a business broker. So I help entrepreneurs exit. I'm doing some entrepreneurial connective things like a podcast and community stuff. And I'm really just kind of loving my life right now without this like really clear destination of where I'm going to land. So that has this weird, like, I'm enjoying it, but also I'm worried because it doesn't feel as productive as I used to feel all the time. So I guess you could say I'm in,
well, when
like,
you're a doer, to be is very challenging sometimes.
yeah, it really is. Like, I'm uncomfortable being comfortable, if that makes any sense.
Well, it makes complete sense, but there's also nuance. You know, again, I love the fact that you are so keen to language, because when I reflect back some language here as well, I think you'll understand where I'm going with it. But you specifically said, I haven't decided what I want to be next.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's the difference. I would suggest that probably for the first time in your adult life, because of the security that you've established for yourself in the success that you've had in your businesses, it's not about what you're going to be, but who you're going to be in this next phase of your life. And what are the things that are going to be activities that will be a part of fulfilling who you are. Right.
Yeah. You're right.
It's an identity shift. It's an identity shift to now centering in what you value most, which took you years to realize.
Yeah, that's exactly. I am a doer, and right now I'm not doing. So I'm having a little bit of an identity crisis. You're absolutely right.
I deeply identify with it. Again, I'm somebody who learned to receive love, validation, and connection through performance. But I will tell you, brother, the more I've learned to be, the more I am, and it is a powerful shift. But I appreciate your vulnerability and everything. Now, let's talk quickly about your show as we kind of bring this to fruition. I want to make sure that people can follow you, learn from you, but talk a little bit about your own podcast, How to Founder. Why did you start it? Who do you talk to? And what's kind of the goal of the show?
Yeah, podcasting is funny, isn't it? Like we're on a podcast talking about podcasting. Podcasting for me is kind of like sex. and the reason is because, I love doing it. If I'm lucky, I get to do it 3-4 times a week. And my wife has no idea what I'm trying to accomplish.
Oh, that is maybe the best fucking line I've ever heard about podcasting. Bro, that was so good. Oh.
So yeah, I don't really have an end game for the podcast other than I just want. So I do it with a buddy of mine, Chris Franks.
Okay.
And we talk. The one thing in the entrepreneurial community that I think is really lacking, you get inspirational founder stories. You get the way Jeff Bezos runs a meeting, or like things that are hard to apply. 2 things about entrepreneurship. One is it's really lonely. And 2, there's not a lot of really good, just like, here's how you read a P&L, like tactics, practical advice. So we're attempting to make it a little less lonely by having a lot of like, look, you're struggling. We've been there, right? Or we're there. And also, and here's, between Chris and I, 40 years of experience, plus we bring on guests all the time to talk about and deep dive on a tactical thing that you can then just go take and practice longer term. So it's developing the mental models to understand how to do things like, how do I fire an employee that's stealing from me? Or how do I do a layoff? Or just all of those things that are problems, and usually first time things that entrepreneurs have to run through. So that's what we're doing. It's How to Founder. And you find us just by going to howtofounder.com, and you can link with me on LinkedIn there, and we're available on all the, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And we've just started, we're having a blast. I think the show's pretty good, but time will tell.
Well, and I mean, here's the reality. It sounds to me like you're doing the show for you, and it's going to have an ancillary benefit for other people with the intent that's going into it. So good or bad, you're doing it and it's serving a purpose, right? And so like that's the other side of it, is I'm sure as long as you've got energy connected to it, which it sounds like you do. I mean, 3 to 4 times a week, not really knowing what the end goal is, right? I love the analogy, bro. That was so good. I really appreciate your willingness to be so real with us, so vulnerable, sharing the parts of your story. And yet I also know that you consult with many other organizations. You are interviewing folks all the time, and you are a wealth of knowledge across a variety of topics in entrepreneurship. But what I appreciate, and again, this goes back to communication, you make it accessible because you're willing to be real, and you're willing to talk about the stuff that didn't go so well. You're willing to lean in and discuss and communicate. Yep, I could have done this differently. I learned this in this situation. Yep, I thought this was going to be great, but it ended up backfiring, right? Your ability to really make things accessible with your own stories is everything. And so, brother, man, I'm grateful for your time with us here today. Did you have a closing message you wanted to leave everybody with?
I always recommend the book StrengthsFinder.
Phenomenal.
So go learn about yourself and read that book. I'll leave you with that. Just if you haven't read it, go read it. It's an easy read and get comfortable in your own skin.
I 100% double down on that. In fact, 10 years ago, I was actually facilitating trainings around that with my teams because I believed in it so much back then. And really highlighting strengths, which is something that we both agree with. So, Anthony, man, I really appreciate you being with us here today, brother.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And for those of you that just watched Anthony flip open his lid, we knew, right? Though he had an inkling for tech early on, it was really his curiosity and his questions and his ability to refine his craft that not only gave him the ability to rise and have 6 successful exits, but to have learned the lessons in leadership, in love, in life that have actually allowed him to be so real with himself today. To recognize that he's been able to have all of this impact. He's continuing to have impact, but in this stage of his success, he's redefining who he is beyond just what he does. And guess what? That's where real freedom is going to come in. Each and every one of you have the chance to learn from him, step into the tactics and strategies that he deployed with you all today. But to get to where you want to go, it's ultimately going to require one thing: for you to flip open your lid and scan your can. See you next time.
What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible. But to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.